Before we begin, a quick content warning. The events you are about to hear involve armed standoffs, death, and law enforcement actions that ended in tragedy. Some viewers may find this episode distressing. It was the summer of 1992 in the rugged mountains of northern Idaho. A remote cabin set isolated among dense woods, winding trails, home to Randy Weaver, his family, and a lifestyle far removed from the city, the government, and the world at large. What began as a routine investigation into firearm sales would spiral into an armed confrontation with federal agents. By the end, lives would be lost and a nation would question the limits of government power, and Ruby Ridge would become a cautionary tale about fear, miscommunication, and tragedy. The story of Ruby Ridge is not a simple one. It is a story of suspicion and isolation, of law enforcement overreach, and the choices made in the moments of tension that could never be undone. Randy Weaver was born in 1948 in Iowa, raised in a conservative, deeply religious household. He grew up with a strong sense of self-reliance and skepticism of authority, traits that would shape his life choices. In his early years, he served in the Army, learning survival skills, firearms, and discipline, tools that would later define his isolation in the Idaho wilderness. In the 1980s, Weaver moved his family to northern Idaho, seeking a life removed from the pressures of society. He built a cabin on a remote ridge surrounded by dense forest and steep trails. Randy, his wife Vicki, and their children lived simply, largely disconnected from modern conveniences, and followed a strict set of beliefs that emphasized self-sufficiency, personal freedom, and a distrust for government authority. The family's isolation drew the attention of federal authorities. Randy had been involved in firearm sales at local gun shows, and in 1989, he was approached by an undercover ATF informant who claimed to want to purchase illegal sawed-off shotguns. Randy refused, and shortly after, he was charged with selling 2 illegal firearms. What might have been a simple case handled quietly through the courts quickly escalated. Court dates were set. Randy missed a hearing, and the U.S. Marshal Service began surveillance, monitoring the Weaver cabin from a distance. The family's every move became a part of a federal investigation. Neighbors reported seeing unmarked vans and agents in the woods, taking photographs and mapping the area. Randy's distrust for the government intensified. For him, it wasn't just a legal case. It was a personal intrusion, a violation of the life he had chosen in the mountains. By the summer of 1992, tensions had reached a breaking point. Federal agents were closing in, armed surveillance was in place, and a standoff that would shock the nation was about to begin. The morning of August 21st, 1992 started like any other in Idaho wilderness. But for the Weaver family, it would become a day that would change everything. U.S. Marshals who had been surveilling the property for weeks approached the cabin. Their mission was simple in theory: make contact, confirm the family's presence, gather evidence related to Randy Weaver's firearms charges. But what happened next would ignite a deadly chain of events. Shots were fired. A violent exchange erupted between Marshals and the Weavers. Randy's 14-year-old son Samuel and a family friend Kevin Harris returned fire, hitting multiple Marshals. One U.S. Marshal, William Deegan, was killed in the skirmish. The incident triggered an immediate escalation. The FBI's hostage rescue team was called in. For the first time, the situation had moved from surveillance to an active standoff. Every action, every decision would be scrutinized in the days that followed. Randy Weaver retreated to his cabin with his wife Vicki and his remaining children. The family barricaded themselves inside, fearful of more federal aggression. The remote location, thick forest, and rugged terrain gave them an advantage, but it also trapped them in a tense siege with no easy way out. Negotiators attempted to make contact, but communication was limited. Randy, distrustful and protective, refused to leave without guarantees for his family's safety. The standoff drew national attention, with news crews reporting from miles away, turning Ruby Ridge into a media spectacle before all the facts were known. As the sun set that day, the mountain was quiet. Too quiet. But beneath the calm, federal agents and the Weaver family prepared for a confrontation that would leave deaths on both sides, spark congressional hearings, and forever change the way law enforcement approaches standoffs. The siege continued into the following days. Tensions ran high. Every moment on the ridge was monitored by snipers and surveillance teams. Federal agents were operating under rules of engagement that were later called into question, guidelines that allowed for lethal force in situations far less clear than standard FBI protocols. On August 22, 1992, tragedy struck. Vicki Weaver, Randy's wife, stepped outside the cabin with her infant daughter. Sniper fire rang out. Vicki was killed instantly. The baby miraculously survived unharmed, shielded by her mother's body. The nation would later see this as one of the most devastating moments in the Ruby Ridge standoff. Randy's 14-year-old son, Samuel, had already been shot the day before, and Kevin Harris, the family friend, was still inside the cabin. The combination of grief, fear, and confusion escalated the standoff. The death sparked immediate controversy. Critics accused federal agents of excessive force and poor planning. The FBI's internal investigation would later reveal miscommunication, over-aggressive engagement rules, and failure to negotiate strategy. For Randy Weaver, the loss of his wife was unimaginable. For the country, Ruby Ridge became a symbol of government overreach, raising questions about the balance between law enforcement authority and individual rights. As negotiations continued, Randy and Kevin eventually surrendered, but the scars of the siege would last a lifetime. Congressional hearings, lawsuits, and internal reviews followed, leaving Ruby Ridge as a cautionary tale for law enforcement and the public alike. The mountain was quiet once more, but the story of Ruby Ridge would echo for decades, a reminder of the deadly consequences when trust breaks down between citizens and the government. The standoff at Ruby Ridge officially ended when Randy Weaver and Kevin Harris surrendered to the authorities. But the story didn't end there. In the weeks and months that followed, the deaths of Vicki and Samuel Weaver sparked national outrage, congressional hearings, and widespread reevaluation of federal law enforcement tactics. Randy Weaver was initially charged with multiple offenses, including murder and firearms violations. Many of those charges were later dropped or reduced, reflecting the complexity of the case and the scrutiny of the government actions. Kevin Harris was also charged, but ultimately acquitted, as evidence showed he only acted in self-defense. The FBI faced intense criticism. Internal reviews revealed that operational planning was flawed, rules of engagement were overly aggressive, and communications between agencies was disjointed, something that we see very often in government. Several agents involved in the siege were disciplined, and the incident led to significant reforms within federal law enforcement regarding use of force protocols, negotiation strategies, and oversight. Ruby Ridge became a rallying point for critics of government overreach. Anti-government groups cited it as evidence of federal abuse of power, while law enforcement professionals used the case as a study in operational missteps in crisis management. The tragedy highlighted the delicate balance between enforcing the law and respecting individual rights, a lesson that resonates in every high-stakes law enforcement operation today. Decades later, Ruby Ridge remains a somber reminder. When trust between citizens and their government erodes, the consequences can be deadly, far-reaching, and unforgettable. Ruby Ridge wasn't just a standoff. It was a failure of judgment, of restraint, and of humanity. The deaths of Vicki and Samuel Weaver and the wounding of Kevin Harris should have never happened. Federal authorities crossed a line that no law enforcement operation should ever approach. This tragedy reminds us that power without accountability can be deadly. And while history may try to rationalize it, the truth is simple. Ruby Ridge should have never happened. Next time on Stories from the Vault, we'll uncover the chilling events surrounding National Airlines Flight 967, a mysterious crash that raised questions no one has fully answered. Until then, remember, the consequences of unchecked authority can echo for generations. I'm Kyle Fields. Take care.